to comma or not to comma? That is the question. There are two types of sentence clauses: dependent clauses and independent clauses. Dependent clauses will have subjects joined to verbs, but they will not express a complete thought and by themselves are considered fragments. Independent clauses will also have subjects joined to verbs, but they will express a complete thought, and we would consider them a sentence. But how do you know if what you've written is a dependent clause or an independent clause? Take this example. You write, I am a nurse. I often work long hours. The second clause adds to the thoughts that were introduced in the first clause. And because they relate so closely to each other, students will often try to join two clauses such as this together with a comma. Unfortunately, the second clause, while it does add information to the first, is not depending on the first in any way. In fact, if I were to get rid of the first clause and only read clause number 2, it would still make sense by itself. And vice versa, if I got rid of clause number 2 and only read clause number 1, it would also make sense by itself. They're not depending on each other. They're just related very closely to each other. The way I would create a dependent clause is I would have to add a subordinating conjunction to the beginning of one of them. A subordinating conjunction demotes a clause that's independent and turns it into something that's dependent. The moment you add a subordinating conjunction, your reader begins to wonder, what happens next? Because I am a nurse, now your reader's wondering, what? What happened because you're a nurse? You need to finish the thought, finish the story. In order to do that, you need to attach it to an independent clause that completes its thought. The way we attach it is we add a comma. It's the only time a comma is okay, is when it's dependent, not when it's independent. If I wanted to take these two independent clauses together and join them into one single sentence because they relate so closely, I would need to use a semicolon and not a comma. The semicolon can glue these two independent thoughts together into a single sentence. If you start a sentence with the word if, you have created a dependent clause, and so the comma is appropriate. The word if is one of the most common subordinating conjunctions we use. It's a good idea to memorize the most common subordinators. The moment you do, you'll realize that you use them all the time. If you have a subordinator beginning one of your sentences or coming before an independent clause in a sentence, you need to separate the two with a comma. It helps the reader pause and collect his or her thoughts and then move on with the reading.